What I'm calling knowledge is everything that we've learned, right? So everything that we think we know that has some usefulness to it. I mean, obviously, you know, learning in school, learning personal skills, learning how to relate to other people, all of that has value. So we're not disputing any of that. There's also knowledge in the form of memories, right? You know, I know how the world works because this happened to me. I've had this experience. This is who I am. All of that's in the field of knowledge about what I am, right? You know, we have knowledge about our relationships, our situation, our opinions about ourselves. All of that's in the realm of knowledge, something that we think we know about who we are. So all of that's of a relatively fixed nature, and it sort of accumulates over a lifetime as, you know, more experiences, more situations, more memories, and over the course of the lifetime, it tends to solidify more and more, like, well, that's just who I am, right? It feels like that. It feels almost like it's hardwired, you know. It's not really a choice anymore. It's really just, well, it's just who I am. Does it feel like that? And then and then we feel somehow that we have to free ourselves from that, because at some point it can begin to feel confining. You know, like it's, you know, we spend, you know, quite a few years, you know, sort of building up our identity that we sort of have some degree of comfort or discomfort about, and then there's a sense of, well, you know, there's a sense of separation from the world. You know, I've worked on this body-mind. I've sort of you know, gotten a reasonable number of skills together, and but it feels like I'm here, you know, this body, this mind, and the world is out there. Other people are out there. Everything I see is out there, and there's some sense. I don't know if you feel. I certainly felt it for a lot of years that somehow the world was somehow just a little bit beyond my grasp, you know, like I didn't quite feel like I plugged into it, like I was sort of impersonating an inhabitant of the world, right? Impersonating an adult. I don't know, does that ring true at all? Like, you know, sort of doing our best to sort of, you know, persuade ourselves and other people that, you know, I'm actually okay, you know, I'm actually, you know, a functional adult. And, you know, we can improve those skills. All of that has value. You know, it certainly, you know, makes a difference in terms of what kind of work we do, what kind of relationships we have, you know, how other people view us. It all has value, so we're not disputing any of that. But it's still all within this realm of, you know, I'm trying to put together my composite philosophy about myself and other people and the world, you know, and that's how this organism is operating in the world, relating to other people. And so from that perspective, the natural thing is, well, I'll just keep working at that model, you know, sort of upgrading my package, my software, right? You know, to, you know, improve my skills, And I think there's an underlying assumption that's fairly prevalent in this country that if I'm just more successful, more skilled, more develop this capacity, then there'll be greater happiness. There's that belief. And that can motivate, it seems to motivate most people for a long time, most people for their entire life, that somehow, there's an expectation that in the future that it'll sort of resolve this sense of not being quite at ease in the world, not being quite at ease in our own skin. That something's not quite enough. And so we continue to try to adjust the skill set, to feel better about ourselves, our situation, our relationships, our work capacities, our careers, our families, all of that to sort of make it all feel good. So I'd suggest all of that's fine, and it's all within the same paradigm. It's all founded on the belief that if I just do this better, then there'll be some state of abiding peace. Seems possible. Right. And spirituality is actually no different, because the exact same thought process is functioning there too. If I just get enlightened, that'll make everything okay. Right? But it's still that, can you see it's still the same, how can something happen? How can I make something happen that'll make this organism feel okay about itself? Completely okay about itself? As is. Faults and all. So it's the same mechanism, but now we have a loftier goal. We have some, that will permanently resolve it. Before, just this common everyday ambition, to sort of get a bigger house or, better situation or look or improve our appearance or whatever, social standing or however we view it. I'm beyond that now. Now I'm going for enlightenment, right? But it's the same movement. It's like, it's not now, but if I work at it, then at some future point, it's absent now, or if not entirely absent, not fulfilled in this moment. But if I work at it, then at some future point, then it will be. That's the hope, right? But that hope doesn't actually jive with the fact that whatever it is that we essentially are must be present now. Completely. Not partially, completely. And it's sort of, that hope about the future is dependent on our denial in this moment that is possible. It's like, no, that couldn't be true. I know it sounds good, but it couldn't be true. And so there's a denial. It's like, no, not me. And we go back to the same self-improvement model, not me, not as I am, maybe in the future, but not now, right? So it's really important to see that the same mental process is in play, that happiness is possible, not now, but at some later point, and all I need to do is up my game in order to be granted that happiness, right? But the important part is to see that it's founded on the belief that something as is isn't sufficient. And I think the fear is that, well, if I just sort of relaxed and, I'm not that happy now, maybe not, I'm speaking in absolute terms here, but we can say, I don't feel completely happy now, so if I just relaxed, then what would ever change? That's sort of the fear, right? But what's telling us that? Right? Just another thought, right? It's just the mind, the conditioned mental patterns coming in saying, no, you can't relax, you've got to keep it up, you can't let down your guard, you have to keep working at it, and, the payoff will be in the future sometime. So that's the fear. But the fear comes from the really holding on to, I know how everything works. I know, I've spent, these decades sort of figuring out, what I am as a person, how the world works, and I'm not going to just let that go because I've worked so hard at the concept of improving my way to a future state of happiness. But so much of that is grounded in our belief about what we actually are, that we're so certain that our truest, deepest identity is this experience of the body, with the sort of mind thinking it's in charge of it, right? That package. And from that perspective, it's like, yeah, I just want to feel good, right? I just want to feel okay. And so, if that is our identity, then it actually makes sense to sort of pursue pleasure, do things that make me feel good. Why not? That you can't argue that it's not preferable to feeling bad, right? Of course, we'd all like to feel good, right? The difficulty is that as these organisms, we're vulnerable. We're vulnerable to the next shock. We're vulnerable to sickness. We're vulnerable to loss. We're vulnerable to insult. We're vulnerable to all kinds of things. We're vulnerable to things that we tell ourselves in the privacy of our own head that make us feel poorly. So as long as we take ourselves to be this conditioned organism, we can seek pleasure, but we all know that it's not only about that. It's about the whole spectrum of human experience. So we're tossed about, ship on the sea in a storm, tossed about all the time. Sometimes it feels really good. Sometimes it feels really, really difficult. But it has everything to do with what we take ourselves to be. You know, if we take ourselves to be this body, that's the natural conclusion. You know, I'm in this for the duration, and I'm going to try to, you know, experience as much pleasure, things that make me feel good as I can, and hope nothing too bad happens before I die. You know, that's the model. But all the while, there is something that that is the ground of our experience all the time, and that is all of that entire spectrum of human experience is always and only happening within awareness, within this spaciousness. And that's already available. So when we can come back to that as in recognition of that is our true home, and yes, all of this arisings, experiences, feelings, emotions, thoughts, all of that's happening within that. Wonderful, beautiful. It's not all fun and games, but it is all amazing, right? All quite amazing that this we get to experience, you know, from a very sort of immersed perspective. We're not talking about anything distant, you know, like, you know, up in a spacecraft looking at poor me down there at Earth. We get to be fully immersed in the experience as well. But when we take ourselves to be this, then it all feels very personal. By recognizing that what we truly are is this, is this space within which all of this happens, not a physical space, but the capacity within which all of this happens, then we can still participate fully. The only difference is that we can do it without fear. Because this awareness isn't of the same world of form that is vulnerable to insults of all kinds. And that I know that you've all experienced this awareness, can go and check in with it at will, yes? And then the movement is just more and more to recognize that is what we truly are. That is our home. That is our true nature, our essential beingness, our divine spirit, whatever word you like, right? Living this life through this form. That spirit or awareness isn't demanding that anything be fixed. It's not requiring any prerequisites. It already is as it is, totally complete. Complete and yet always alive, always present always for whatever's arising. From that perspective, it's not it already is allowing everything to be. You know, from the personal perspective is, I'm trying to let everything be as it is, right? I'm doing my best to try to let everything, but awareness is already doing it, right? From the personal perspective is, I'm just trying to quiet my mind. From awareness, it's everything's already quiet. And within that, sounds happen, events happen, mental noise happens, confusion happens, feeling down happens, feeling up happens, all of that. And in the meantime, the awareness is at peace, always. So at some point we just become, it may not happen overnight, it might not happen like the flash of insight to recognize, that awareness is already present. That can happen in a moment. But this identity shift seems to happen much more gradually, as far as I can tell. Right? It happens much more as we become as separate beings, identified with our body mind. We become less and less convinced that that's our ultimate reality, and we gradually relax our grip on that. And when we do, what remains is already one with the experience. As a separate self, we're not ever going to find oneness, right? We can try. We can have an experience of, in a moment of sort of merging with things, but that's different than recognizing that, what I truly am is inseparable. Don't have to try to be at one with everything else. What is our most essential nature is already at one with everything else, simply because it allows everything. It allows this body-mind to do and say what it does. It also allows other people. Our mind is never going to get there. Gradually, it'll sort of come around, but it's reluctantly. It's not. At some point, the mind isn't going to say, "Oh yeah, everybody's just going to be as they are, and I'm good with that." Not really. We can try. It's a good religious aspiration. That's fine, but what we're talking about here is something deeper than that, where the recognition is that the appearance of the other person, however they may appear, is also a manifestation of this one alive awareness that's functioning in all of us. And over there, routed through that conditioning, it looks like that. Routing through this conditioning, it looks like this. Which is better? Which is right? Which is wrong? Different. Same source, right? Same source. So this identity shift isn't something that we can sort of, in one sort of energetic moonshot, we're going to convince ourselves of. It's more like just seeing that the suffering that's caused, that we cause ourselves and indirectly cause other people, is a result of this identification with this form and trying to maximize its pleasure in the world, because that's always going to be at odds, right, with what's happening. So we started off talking about wisdom as compared to knowledge. So when we're functioning from this sense of separation, sense of, this is me over here, separate self, that's operating from knowledge, from everything that's gone before, programs to a very large degree how this organism will act and what it'll say and what it'll do, what it'll think, what it'll tell itself. Right? Wisdom comes from a different direction. It comes when the organism becomes more transparent gradually over time. More transparent just means believing in its own sense of separation less and less. Less and less able to convince itself that that's what I am. And what remains is just this recognition of what's always been present, what's always present for whatever's happening, good, bad, or indifferent, right? And so the spiritual teaching about, be without preferences, the little me can try to be without preferences. It can try really hard to do that. But what would be its motivation for doing that? To feel better. I'm trying to be without preferences because I want to feel better, which is actually my preference. Right? But the all the while, the awareness already is without preference. Just because it will remain present for whatever, right? I mean, everything that's ever happened in your life, right? All the good things, all the difficult things, all the mundane things, you were there for, right? You were present for. We attributed that to me. This body was there, but it was actually the awareness that knew that you were present. You might not have put it in those words, but that's what was happening already. It's a done deal. It's really a done deal. It really is. We think we're not enlightened, but we're going to get enlightened, and it's going to feel like this. But the reality is that the awakeness is already fully present, and the journey is gradually being willing to accept the fact that the awakeness has always been there. Right? It's not an attainment. It's just letting go of misperceptions, more and more misperceptions. All the misperceptions. I just mean the beliefs in the present moment that convince us why the awakeness is not fully present now. All those beliefs. And they're very convincing, right? It's always, yes, but what about this? What about when my mind is busy? What about when I feel confused? What about when I don't like other people? What about when I don't know, eat a quart of ice cream? What about if, I think terrible thoughts about somebody? What about? We're talking about what's arising within awareness. We're not talking about awareness. Right? And it's true that over time, that if the more we can come back to noticing what's happening from the perspective of awareness, that has I hesitate to use the word purifying, but it does have a purifying effect. It gradually rounds off a few rough edges. Not because it's trying to do that, it's just the nature of it. The more time that we can spend in, knowingly in and operating from that sense of beingness, and noticing things happening within it, the more time we can spend doing that, things begin to lose their personal sticky quality. And so it has a purifying effect without us trying to be more pure as good spiritual people, right? To become more pure for what? If we're doing it for motivation, right? I'm becoming more pure because I want to feel better about myself, right? I want to feel more spiritual. I want to get the payoffs from, being this spiritual, highly purified spiritual being, right? So if we're doing it from that perspective, it's already tainted. All we can do is notice what this body mind is doing without judgment. That's the real key. Just see it. There it is again. That very familiar conditioning. I've seen it 100 times before. It's come out of my mouth that way. It's this familiar emotion, this reactive response, whatever it is. Seen it before. Not dismissive, right? Not justifying. Right? Not spiritualizing, not saying, well, hey, I'm just awareness, so whatever I do, deal with it. It's not that. Right? It's just noticing it. Not who we are, but it's how this body-mind was conditioned. The fact that we still get to live out this life in this body-mind makes it worth paying attention to that. It just doesn't define what we are. So we do ourselves and other people a favor by just being willing to notice that. And there is a gradual harmonization, never finished, right? We never get to an end point where we say, hey, it's all perfect. And that doesn't happen. Well, maybe for some dead people, but not for alive people. So yeah, that's when as we spend more time just in that recognition of that essential beingness that we are, without trying to manipulate it, without using it for some purpose. Just being with it. It has an infinite depth to it. Most people say, okay, I've got the awareness thing. What's next, right? And then we're back to the same game. Like, how do I use this to get somewhere else that's not present now? And what we can recognize from the spending more and more time with just being with this aware capacity is that it has a wisdom to it, a wisdom that's not dependent on our past. And we've all experienced it at times. We've all, done something, said something spontaneously that was just right, just for that moment, just what the other person needed to hear. It wasn't something that came out of our philosophy or our psychology about what the other person should hear, or we do something that just feels like a natural movement for the situation. There seems to be a movement in a certain direction with not a lot of mental anguish associated with it. If we spend, days trying to think pros and cons and arguments for and against doing something, that's not it. That's coming out of mind. And what usually happens is that when we really investigate it, what usually happens is we spend days thinking this or that, or should I do this or that? And then for some reason we just say, okay, I'm just going to do this, right? It's almost like we make the decision and then we can justify it afterwards. So there can be sort of this, just want to get it over with. I just want to decide something. I'll go in this direction. But it's not that. It's much more much quieter process. Not really a process, it's just sort of like more like a little gentle breeze, like, yeah, this seems, my curiosity, my energy seems to be sort of moving more in this direction. So, I'll follow that, right? I'm curious. I'm, not sort of mentally curious, but I'm just drawn towards some movement. And then more and more we learn to trust that. Less and less it's coming from, a strategic plan, and more coming from just, it seems to be how things are going in the next moment. And without ever knowing how life is going to unfold, it does unfold. It will anyway. But there's a difference between thinking I'm doing it and I'm letting, sort of like dancing, but let life take the lead, right? You see, you still have to do your part, but, if you let life sort of take the lead, it feels different. So that's more what wisdom feels like, rather than knowledge about that comes from the past, the conditioned past.